A man bought a plane ticket, then hijacked the flight. November 24, 1971, a man using the name Dan Cooper boarded a Northwest Orient flight in Portland, Oregon. Mid-flight, he handed a note to a flight attendant claiming he had a bomb. He demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. Authorities complied. The plane landed in Seattle. Passengers were released. Then Cooper ordered the crew to fly toward Mexico, somewhere over the Pacific Northwest wilderness. At night, in a rainstorm, he strapped on a parachute, grabbed the money, and jumped into the dark. He was never seen again. The FBI investigated for 45 years. Only a small bundle of the ransom bills ever turned up. On a riverbank in 1980. No body, no confirmed identity, no answers. So who was D.B. Cooper, and is it possible he actually survived? It's the day before Thanksgiving, 1971, Portland International Airport, Oregon. A man approaches the Northwest Orient ticket counter and buys a one-way ticket to Seattle. He pays cash. He gives his name as Dan Cooper. He is described as calm, unremarkably so. Middle-aged, dark suit, a plain tie, a briefcase. He orders a bourbon and soda once he's seated. He tips the flight attendant. By all accounts, he looks like just another businessman flying home for the holiday. There are 36 other passengers on board. None of them are nervous. None of them have any reason to be. The flight takes off at 2:50 in the afternoon. It's supposed to be a 30-minute hop up to Seattle. It will not go as scheduled. Shortly after takeoff, the man in seat 18C passes a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She assumes it's a phone number. Apparently, that happened more than you'd think. She slips it into her pocket without reading it. He leans toward her and quietly says, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." She reads it. The note states that he has a device in his briefcase, and he wants her to sit down next to him. She does. He opens the briefcase just enough for her to see what she later describes as red cylinders, wires, and a battery. Whether it was a real bomb has never been confirmed, but Florence Schaffner believed it. And that was enough. Florence relays the demands to the cockpit. The man calling himself Dan Cooper wants $200,000 in negotiable $20 bills. He wants 4 parachutes, 2 primary, 2 reserve, and he wants a fuel truck standing by in Seattle. He is not loud. He is not threatening beyond what he's already said. According to crew members, he is polite, even pleasant. He orders another drink. He pays for it. While the plane circles Seattle, authorities on the ground scramble. The FBI and Northwest Orient make the decision. Comply. They don't want 36 passengers in the air with a potential explosive device. The money, $200,000, is assembled from Seattle area banks. The bills are photographed and the serial numbers are recorded in full. That detail will matter later. The 4 parachutes are sourced. By the time the plane lands in Seattle, everything is ready. The passengers deplane. They don't fully know what just happened. The flight crew stays on board. Dan Cooper lets them. He releases the passengers without incident, accepts the ransom bag, takes the parachutes, and then gives his next set of instructions. They're going to fly to Mexico City, altitude no higher than 10,000 feet. Flaps partially deployed, speed as slow as the aircraft can manage. The pilots tell him the 727 will need to refuel somewhere. He accepts that. They'll stop in Reno, Nevada. The plane takes off again just after 7:30 that evening. The crew up front, Dan Cooper in the back. And somewhere over southwestern Washington state, something happens. At around 8 p.m., a warning light activates in the cockpit. The aft air stair, the set of stairs built into the tail of a Boeing 727 that fold down from the back of the plane, has been activated. The crew calls back to check. No answer. A flight attendant is instructed not to go back there. The plane lands in Reno, Nevada at 10:15 that night. Law enforcement is waiting. They board the aircraft. The aft staircase is deployed and hanging open. Dan Cooper is gone. On the seats, they find his clip-on tie and a tie clip. They find 2 of the 4 parachutes, both reserve chutes, which are typically not functional for actual jumps. The 2 working primary parachutes are gone. He jumped somewhere over a roughly 25-mile stretch of wilderness between the cities of Ariel and Woodland in Washington state. The temperature outside the aircraft at that altitude was estimated to be near -7 degrees Fahrenheit. It was dark. It was heavily forested terrain below. Most experts who were consulted at the time said flatly, he could not have survived. The FBI launched one of the most extensive investigations in the agency's history. The composite sketch, a middle-aged man, olive complexion, dark eyes, around 6 feet tall, was circulated nationally. The name D.B. Cooper actually came from a press error. A reporter confused the alias Dan Cooper with a different person named D.B. Cooper, who was briefly and incorrectly connected to the case. The wrong name stuck. The real alias was Dan Cooper. Investigators looked at hundreds of suspects over the decades. One of the most seriously considered, according to FBI records, was a man named Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., who pulled off a nearly identical hijacking just 5 months later in 1972, same method, aft stairs, parachute exit, and was caught and imprisoned. Some investigators reportedly believed McCoy and Cooper were the same man. Others strongly disagreed, citing differences in physical description. McCoy was killed in a prison escape attempt in 1974. He was never definitively linked to the Cooper case. Then, in February 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram was digging along the north bank of the Columbia River at a place called Tina Bar, about 30 miles southwest of where Cooper was believed to have jumped. He found 3 bundles of $20 bills, deteriorated, rubber-banded, and partially buried. The serial numbers matched the Cooper ransom exactly. 290 bills, approximately $5,800 total. The rest of the $200,000 has never been found. How those bills got to Tina Bar, whether they were carried by water, buried deliberately, or simply scattered, has never been conclusively determined. Here is what the evidence cannot tell us. It cannot tell us who Dan Cooper actually was. It cannot tell us whether he survived the jump. It cannot explain how those bills ended up where they did, or why only those bills, and none of the rest of the money, ever surfaced. Over the decades, investigators have noted several things about the hijacking that suggest the man had some specific knowledge. He knew the 727 had a deployable aft staircase. That was not common public knowledge in 1971. He knew to request a low-altitude, low-speed flight configuration. He knew to ask for 4 parachutes, which some analysts believe was a calculated move to prevent authorities from giving him a sabotaged chute. They couldn't be sure which one he'd use. One theory suggests he had military parachute training. Another points to knowledge of Pacific Northwest terrain. A man named Robert Rackstraw was publicly identified by a private investigative team as a strong suspect as recently as 2016, based on what the team claimed were coded messages in Cooper's note. The FBI reviewed their findings and did not make an arrest. Rackstraw denied being Cooper until his death in 2019. The FBI officially suspended active investigation of the D.B. Cooper case in July 2016, after 45 years. They cited a decision to redirect resources toward other priorities. They have not closed it. Technically, it remains open. So here is where we stand. Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, in the dark, in the cold, on the night before Thanksgiving in 1971, a man stepped off a staircase and into the sky. He had $200,000 in a bag. He had a working parachute. He had a plan, or something close to one, and then he was gone. No body was ever found, no parachute was ever recovered intact. Almost none of the money ever resurfaced. More than 50 years later, the FBI has no confirmed identity, no arrest, no resolution, just a composite sketch, a recovered tie, a handful of deteriorated bills, and a case file that the United States government has never been able to close. Maybe he didn't survive. Maybe the jump, the cold, the terrain. Maybe all of it was too much, and he's somewhere in those woods long since gone. Or maybe, just maybe, he walked away, landed in a clearing, buried the parachute, hitched a ride, and spent the rest of his life as someone completely ordinary. Watching the news coverage, reading the headlines, knowing exactly who Dan Cooper was. The cold archive never closes a file. What do you think happened? Tell us in the comments and subscribe because the next file is already open.